Welcome back to Lead Well with Jackie. Today we're diving into a topic that comes up time and time again in leadership coaching conversations, and that is personal brand and executive presence. What do people really think when they hear your name? How do you show up in a room, in a meeting, or even online, and what kind of impression are you leaving behind? That's your personal brand in action, and it's closely tied to your executive presence. The impact you have and the authority you hold, whether you're speaking or just sitting at the table. To explore this further, I'm joined by Alex Cuttiford, career strategist and host of the Kinda Planned podcast. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
Alex, we're going to dive straight in. What is personal brand?
The way that I've defined personal brand, as I've sort of been thinking through it a lot over the last few years, is around it's your ability to communicate who you are, what you value, who you belong to, and who you're best positioned to serve. And I guess that's that's the high end picture of what I guess I've formed in my mind around what that really looks like and what you're trying to achieve when we talk about this idea of building a personal brand. And so we need to be able to do the inner work within ourselves to really understand ourselves. And then we need other people around us for all kinds of different reasons at different times that can help us along that journey. And then it's all about taking strategic action and getting to a point where you actually have to do something if you want to see something different. And so personal branding for me, and where it fits into all of that, whilst in some ways it flows through all of it, I think it's very much that piece around how we connect from self to others. And we don't magically just to get all the people around us that we want around us. And we don't magically just start showing up in the world exactly how we want to present ourselves. We need to think through that and what that actually means for us, and how we want to go about that, and how that feels right for us, and all of those things, so that self, others, and then also it doesn't happen just in our mind. You need to have actually put yourself out there and taken some sort of action for that personal brand, I guess, to be revealed to the world, because what's the point having a personal brand in your head? It probably isn't a personal brand yet. It's just your thoughts. So yes, that's where I sort of see it all landing in my mind, when it looks and sounds a lot prettier than what it actually looks like in reality, trying to build your personal brand.
Yeah, it sounds easy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you talk to the self, others, actions. When I think of the delineation between personal brand and executive presence, I think the self and others component really sort of lands in that way. So I would say that personal brand is kind of, if we think of a directional thing from self to others, it's like, how do I want to show up and how do I want to present myself to others? And then executive presence is almost others to self, which is, and what is the impact of how I'm showing up in terms of how other people perceive me and how they respond to or interpret my presence. Like, it's kind of a nice way of thinking. It's like this bi-directional thing.
Yeah, because it's sort of like that, who you belong to and who you serve. That's the sort of external part. But then there's who am I and what do I value, and that's coming from internal, and the action is the communication, and that's the sort of key part. And there are all kinds of ways that we can be communicating, whether it's through the way that we speak, the way that we dress, who we associate with. All of these things feed into this picture that people are getting of us, and this little snapshot. And people are only getting really small snapshots. When you think about like how much people actually see of your life, it's so much less than what you would think, right? Because you feel like everyone's watching you all of the time. But actually, there's like so many gaps. And so it only does take a little bit to be able to get yourself moving in the right direction. But it also, at the same time, it's just recognizing that people have a lot of gaps. And so wherever we can help them fill those in as best as possible and as easily as possible, the better for what we want to achieve.
And I do think, what you mentioned earlier around being intentional with that is key. Like
Mm,
actually pausing and saying, okay, well, what is my personal brand and why is it important? Why is it worth my time and consideration? But then also, what do I want it to be? How do I want to be seen? What light do I want people to see me in? What are the attributes of personal brand? Like you mentioned, what we're wearing, for example. Is it everything?
mm. Well, I think in many ways, yes, it is everything in terms of what is being communicated, what we are communicating about ourselves. And I guess depending on what it is and why you're communicating will impact what aspects, I guess, are more prevalent.
I just want to sort of emphasize a point that you've just made there, which is that personal brand is not just everything. It's not just all of our personal attributes. It's what we're communicating.
Mm,
So
yeah,
obviously appearance is really low hanging fruit because if we're in a visible workplace, for example, or on social media or whatever, then that is something that people will use to create an impression of us. But it's also the reason that I want to tease that out a little bit is because people who have lower confidence or imposter syndrome or, feel less comfortable in public speaking or in executive meetings or whatever, those thoughts don't necessarily need to feed into your personal brand
yeah,
or executive presence. It's what attributes you want to communicate
yeah,
that make up your personal brand. So it's to your point, it's your actions.
yeah, yeah. One of the other big aspects is around your micro habits. And
Mm,
that's the space I actually think you're really building a strong personal brand by way of those interactions that you're having with the people closest to you, like whether it's, in your workplace or the place that you're rocking up day in, day out, the place where after a couple of weeks you can't fake or hide anything. You're on display to the world, and it's who you are is eventually going to become known.
mm.
Um, and it's in that space that you can really be influential in this, like be thinking about the things like how you speak up in a meeting or when you don't speak up in a situation of, I'm not going to participate in that gossip, or I
Mm.
am going to participate in that gossip. And either way, you're
It's a
starting
choice.
to build a picture for people of what they can expect from you. And sometimes that's going to be a good thing and sometimes it's going to be a bad thing. And so that's where the self aspect of that would be getting clear on, and building your self awareness to understand what are the little things that I'm doing every day, and is that actually moving me in the direction that I want to go? If you become known as someone that gossips around the office or pulls people down, you're not magically just going to be looked at as someone that's good for a team leader role or a
Mm.
leadership role. So yeah, this has all these little impacts. The little things I think have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I agree with you. Many years ago when I was like, right, okay, like, time to accelerate on my career and really focus because, maternity leaves and children kind of
Mm,
suck the life out of you. Um, and I remember, and I had it on my people who have worked with me will probably remember I had this on my laptop for years, which was positive impact with every interaction.
mm,
That was, and now just hearing you explain that sort of those micro habits, that's actually what I was doing without even knowing. Like
mm,
I just decided, okay, well, how do I want to show up in my place of work because I'm ready to take these next steps?
mm,
And it was, well, I just want to leave every situation, scenario, meeting, conversation better than how I found it. And
mm,
I think that if I can do that consistently, I can create ripples of positivity and change.
mm,
And it's hard to see it in the moment, but in retrospect, I think, oh, okay, that might have actually worked.
mm.
Like, oh, phew.
Yeah,
um, but
yeah,
it does, right? Because it's like that intention setting informed my behaviors,
yeah,
and that meant that I didn't engage in gossip, and I actively strive to help other people, even if it wasn't my job or within my remit or whatever.
Mm.
And it is those, and I think that it's, the word habit is important. It's not micro actions, it's micro habits, right?
Yeah.
So it's repeated actions over time,
Yeah.
so that people know what, to your words, what to expect of you.
Yeah. And like you've just said, the mindset. So, you're not going to stick at a personal brand if it isn't getting driven by something that a goal that is greater than the cost of being intentional about all the way that you show up each day and stuff. So, and the mindset so often drives the micro habits and the behaviors and the actions that you're wanting to do. Like, and it comes up in most conversations I have when you get into this convo around, what comes first, the opportunities or the mindsets. And, often the opportunities are there, but the mindset allows you to see them and then start acting on them and filtering which ones you want to pursue and which ones you don't. And so I think very much before you're getting hooked up on, I need to have a personal brand because that's what everyone says I need to do. Well, first, it's zooming back from that and going, what is it that I actually want to achieve? What are the things I want to
Yeah.
do? What are my goals with my life and my career?
Mhm.
And if I'm going to achieve that, there's going to be a whole lot of people that I need to bring on a journey with me. And that's really what you're doing when you're building a personal brand is you're you're building towards something that requires others to understand where you're going, what you're trying to do, your own ambitions. You're trying to add value to others along the way, and that's how I think about it. It's about you're trying to add value, and then it's also recognizing that doesn't always mean that it looks pretty in terms of like you're not always just trying to kiss everyone's ass. You're trying to add value where you see it can be added and what you have to offer. And so it's going, I might have to challenge in this, but I can challenge in a way that still builds my personal brand in a positive way rather than detracting from it. And you'll see people do conflict really well and you'll see others do conflict really bad, and how they, and each person has this added another layer to their personal brand and how the people are perceiving them. One person's elevated themselves and another person's maybe left a bit of a tarnish or some repair that needs to happen.
Where's the line between being authentic and being strategic in terms of our personal brand? And if I go back to the example I mentioned earlier around, if someone who has lower confidence or imposter syndrome, but they want their personal brand to be this really confident executive, senior leader.
Mm.
I do see this in clients where there's a bit of a tension point there because it's like, I want to be seen as confident, but I'm not. So
Mm.
it's inauthentic. Like where's the line there and how do we toe it?
Yeah. So action brings clarity and clarity brings confidence. I'll get clarity once I've taken action and I start to give myself something that can give me feedback that can help me recognize, that's not the right way to go. This is the right way. That worked, that didn't. And that starts to build the confidence when you start to get those lessons and you start to see what works and you can go from there. So you can't think your way through all of this before you've just actually tried some things. And unnatural doesn't automatically equal inauthentic either. So, and is it Vim? I'm trying to think. A speaking coach. He's talking about how people often say this when he's coaches people on public speaking and stuff, and everyone's like, "This doesn't feel authentic." And he's making a point. You have the ability to do it. So on some level, it has to be authentic if you're able to do it. Where I really think that line is around your values, and have you violated or clung to a value that is deeply rooted and important to you. So I think there's a couple of gauges there of going, really, I think the line is your values, but it's then also recognizing, there's going to be times when that value that I have is calling me into something that doesn't feel natural. But what's more authentic? Going through something that feels unnatural for a greater purpose of what you're trying to achieve, or not going through something unnatural because you don't want to look unauthentic. That's why getting clear on your values can help you through those uncomfortable moments and being willing to just try something.
Yeah. Yeah, so your purpose is drawing you outside of your comfort zone, and that's okay because it's
Mm.
a values aligned,
Yeah.
purpose led.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing is that the authenticity piece is around the values alignment. And so if you can find a way, once you've determined what you want your personal brand to be, you know, how you want to be showing up, then it's a matter of finding a values aligned way of achieving that. You know,
Mm.
what actions and behaviors will get there. And to your point, sometimes you might just have to take some action and try it on for size, see how it
Yeah.
feels, and that will give you the clarity. And you might go, actually, that does feel outside of my
Mm.
values, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. So great, I've
Yeah.
learned something. I won't do that again, but
Yeah.
I'm going to try something else that is values aligned, so that I can um, bridge the gap, I guess, between authenticity and being strategic.
Mm.
Or it's not even bridging the gap. It's bringing them closer together,
Yeah.
really, isn't it?
And it's because then the flip side of that is going, you don't want to violate your values for the sake of the goal. And so you might work out, no, it's like this is a really good and valid goal. And this would be a really positive thing to do for myself and my community if I was to achieve this goal. But you don't want to get there the wrong way either. And so you try another way, and it's a lesson learnt, and it's all this feedback. And so I think that's where it's taking the pressure off yourself to go, if I try this and it doesn't feel right, you know, you can't just dwell on it forever and beat yourself up over it. It's just, I'm going to give it a try. And if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. And that's okay. And yeah, allow yourself to move on.
Yeah, and I think that the key thing in terms of how we're building our brand is what you were saying before around micro habits, which is you can do something, you can test and learn,
Mm.
and that if you do something that doesn't feel right, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to go, oh, but they did that one thing that one time, and so that's my impression of them. That's not really how it works. It's more of a cumulative effect of all of your behaviors and actions over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if someone gets really stuck on stuck on like one little thing one time, and let's say like how if you're someone that's going to be saying stuff really controversial, and that's probably who you are, and you're happy being controversial, and it's not going to bother you if someone like gets bugged by that, because it's like, but if you're someone that's not very controversial, like I doubt, and unless you're feeling the pressure that you have to go and say really some random really controversial thing this one time, this blurting it out, and even then, like yeah, the weight of numbers are going to be leading to people to who you actually are, and what you're consistently putting out.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of this from two sides of the same coin, right? So personal brand is made up of all of our behaviors, all of our what's visible
Mm.
basically, right? So yes, it is what you post online anywhere because people can find that. People can see it. And it's also how you're showing up in the workplace. It is as fickle as appearance and what you wear, although you could argue whether or not that's fickle. But it's also how you make people feel.
Mm.
So all of those things encompass it. And at the same time, the other side of that coin is that, you know, it takes 33 milliseconds for someone to make an impression of you, to give a first impression. So when you are meeting someone new or you are in a new situation, that how you show up in that moment is going to be weighted
Yep.
in terms of how the people who have visibility of that moment see who you are.
They've just instantly made a snap judgment. I do think though you have the ability to rescue that back more
Mhm.
easily if the next like 10 experiences they have with you move them closer and closer to what you genuinely want them to see and understand you, who you are. There's that ability to rescue that back. And but also it sort of works in your favor as well at times, because like there are people that know me just purely through LinkedIn and that we've met. And there was someone the other day at the event, they were like saying, they were talking to someone else and I had come up and they're like, oh, that's the guy that I see everywhere on LinkedIn. And so I'd already made an impression in their mind before we met. And so
Mm,
in many ways, and this is where it becomes powerful when you build a consistent brand over time, is that you start to build this equity before you're even in the room with someone,
yeah.
or because of the conversations they've heard around you, or they've seen you online.
I think that's why we're talking about the word brand, right? So if you think about Apple or Louis Vuitton or Moet and Chandon or Woolworths, like any of those brands, you have an impression of them instantly. Often that impression will be connected to a logo or symbolism, color. Sometimes it will be sound. Sometimes it will be emotions.
Mm.
And that's the whole. And I used to work in brands, so I'm a bit overly passionate about it. But that is why we're talking about personal branding and personal brands, because it is how your presence evokes something in someone else.
Mm.
Um, and I just want to touch on one of the reasons that I reached out to you about talking about this topic in particular was because I was coaching someone who was going through for lots of job interviews. So we were doing some career coaching, and they were doing some research and came to a session. And this lovely person who I've been working with for about 18 months, they haven't been job hunting all that time. They said, Jackie, I looked at this, this is what you should do in order to give a good first impression. And it was, make sure that you wear a suit, either grey or black. Never have a manicure, like don't have painted nails. Make sure that you have, clean nails. So in the time that I've known this person, she has always had a manicure. She always has this beautiful red nails, and it has become part of her personal brand, in my view. And she said, do I need to go and do that? Like, how important is this? Because this is part of, like, I won't feel like myself without this. And then we started talking about, okay, well, what brand do you want to present? And then so that conversation happened, and then a few days later I was watching the Diary of the CEO podcast. So it was Stephen Bartlett and Simon Sinek, and they were talking, they just kind of touched on it. And Stephen Bartlett said, I had a young guy come and interview for a job with me, and he was wearing a suit, and so I would never employ him. He definitely won't get the role, because I looked at him and I thought, you're a 21-year-old kid. I doubt that he's ever worn a suit in his life. And so it just really struck me that, yes, these are both examples of job interviews, but that's first impression, right? So it's like in both examples, it's one is, here's how you should modify yourself and basically remove any personal branding so that you're kind of neutral when you're making a first impression. But then the other was, if someone makes themselves neutral, I'm not interested. I want to see their personal brand. And it kind of, I think it speaks to the idea of intention and, like, how do you want to show up? Right? Like, if you completely neutralize your brand and then you get the job, are you going to wear a suit to work every day for the rest of your life? And is that going to make you happy?
Yeah, that's it. And that's why, like, you need to weigh up the cost in these scenarios. Like, there are times when you don't just get to be completely on display, right? And we naturally know that there's different scenarios that we might slightly change our behavior in different environments and settings, around different people. We might speak differently around our wife and immediate family than when we're at our grandparents' place. But you're working out in every scenario, like, you're weighing up the cost and benefit, and it might be more of a payoff to stop swearing when you're at grandma's place, because you really respect her and it bothers her, but you love her and you wouldn't be here without her. So you're willing to pull it back. But if you were in a workplace that was like no swearing, and for you, you're like, That's just who I am. That's how I talk. That's how I want to be. I don't want to feel like I'm censoring myself every minute of every day for however long I work here. Nah, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to swear, and then if I don't get the job because of it, I'm willing to cop it. Someone else might be like, swearing isn't that important to me. I'm not going to swear in this interview, and I'll keep that under wraps until maybe later if I feel it out that it's okay to drop an F-bomb here and there. Then I'm okay then.
Fuck it, I'll do
So
it.
yeah. So it's just weighing all these things up. And then again, this comes back to self. What's most important to me, and what are the goals, and how do I want to achieve them? And you keep coming back to that as you navigate all those different scenarios.
I think that it's just also, know your audience and know where you're willing to compromise. If it is really important, if I'm in a very dry, sort of straight-laced profession, and that is something that I love and that I want to do, then I may need to keep that in mind in terms of how I show up in that environment. But if I am a creative, if I'm a graphic designer, for example, and I'm going for a job in a corporate environment, I might slightly adjust how I present myself. But to our point earlier, it still needs to be authentic. So I'm not going to suddenly put on a pantsuit and dress like a middle-aged man so that I can get this job, because it's not sustainable. Yeah. And it's going to be moving outside of my values.
Yeah. And this is where then taking a strengths-based approach is important, because if you're leaning into your strengths, it's amazing what it can cover up. So if you're really sharp in a particular area, people don't care if you're like you're the one that like dresses way more casual than everyone else, or is almost on the edge of disheveled, if because they know he's really intellectually sharp, and he brings this, and we're willing to work around the slightly stretched t-shirt or whatever. I do have people in mind that I'm thinking of right now, or the one that's that's really really good at building relationships and rapport and just brings people in, but they're a little bit of a loose cannon. But everyone seems to love them because they just, they're so genuine in how they engage with people. And then they also have the skill sets to back it up, and the knowledge of the industry that they're in and stuff that they bring it in, they make it work and stuff. And so I think elevating your strengths can definitely compensate for things that could potentially be a contentious area. Back when I was working with more teenagers that are disengaged from school, looking to get it re-engaged into employment or education, and it was always a touchy one when the conversation came up around the mullet.
The mullet.
It's like, and so, but I was strong on, if you want to keep your mullet, keep your mullet. You're just going to have to find your people. and so long as you're hitting all the other markers that are going to be really important, if you rock up, you're really respectful, when they come and speak to you, you stand up, you shake their hand, you give them eye contact, you've come prepared, you've got your resume printed off and you're ready to go, you've dressed well, which my advice was always to people. My advice around in job interviews was always looking, and I might not get a job with Steve Bartlett off of this advice, was that you dress one level higher than what you would typically wear on a day-to-day in that work environment. And so if everyone in that work environment wears, suits and whatever, maybe that interview you're wearing a tie. But maybe in the day-to-day you're wearing a suit but you're not wearing a tie, sort of thing, or something like that. Or if you're going into a creative place, you're just wearing a slightly more elevated outfit of a pretty casual sort of dress or something, So when I think about like what is branding and like that specific word branding, like I go back to, and this is where it links to the belonging piece. So like really branding is when you put a mark on a cow to say it's mine and not yours in the paddock. Wow. And so it is this thing of saying this belongs to me. And in the realm of personal branding, we're saying, like, we're putting a stamp on who we belong to. And I think at different times, like when we're at work, we are belonging to that environment at that time. You know, who we are at home, you know, all of a sudden the belonging is about your partner or your kids, or the, you know, the people you're sharing under your roof with. Is that is the priority belonging right now, and you're going to act accordingly to that environment and those relationships that are there. And so yeah, I think it's the belonging piece is the bit that I think gets lost most in the conversation,
Mm.
because it sort of catches, oh, who I belong to. But we're constantly communicating who we belong to in any given moment by how we're showing up. And so when we push back and we're willing to not fear losing someone's, you know, affection or approval, it's because we're happy not to belong to that person.
Yeah.
Where we or we're willing to risk it because of the value that we place on them, you know. So we might push back on someone because we belong to them, or we might disrespect someone because we don't feel like we belong to them, and we don't want to. Other times we do want to belong to a group or a cause, and so we act in a way that would see us invited in. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's ultimately, you know, as humans, we strive for love and belonging,
Mm,
right? Like we're pack animals
mm,
ultimately.
yeah.
So I really like that. And I think that brings that intention back into it as well, which is, well, who do you want to belong to? Where do you want to belong? How do you want to represent yourself
Mm,
accordingly?
mm,
So I want to just slightly move over to executive presence. And the way that I kind of connect these two is that because executive presence is one of those things that so many people go, you know, I keep getting this feedback in my one-on-ones or in my annual performance review that I need to have more presence or more visibility. And I don't understand what that means because I'm going to the meetings and I'm turning up to the office. Like, you know, what is executive presence and how does it apply, like in practical terms?
mm. It's an interesting one because I think typically I've often, like, I do see executive presence of this really like intangible thing. When I think about it, it is just like that word presence is kind of like this thing where it's like they walk into the room and you feel and think, like you have a strong visceral reaction to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and that like 0.33 seconds that
Mm,
person walked into the room and you think this person knows something, called
mm,
this person is a leader. Like, it's interesting. There's been like people in our office, and like you know, a higher up executive leader has you know, has gone on leave or is seconded across to a different area or something, and so someone else is filling in. The amount of times that person's replacement arrives, and I'll always see different people in the office. There's lots of different teams and branches and stuff. Often that person's replacement will arrive and you know they're the replacement. You haven't spoken to them, you haven't heard anything, you just know that I bet that person's filling in for them
mm.
because they've just walked in with that presence, because they, maybe it's the way they carry themselves, or you know, all those things that we've been talking about is evident in just
Yeah,
their presence when they walk in. Um, but it doesn't mean to say that it's all around, like, you know, when you say executive presence, I think my mind often has gone to, you know, like thinking of someone in that executive role, you know, executive
yeah,
leadership. But but then other people manage to exude it whilst, you know, being a really casual person. But maybe it's the glint in the eye, or the confidence in the voice, or these things, these little intangibles that this makes you think this person's really switched on. This person's like where they're meant to be. This person
yeah,
is in their lane. They're in their zone. And you just get this feeling of like, I could get on board with this person, like, or this person could take me
mhm,
places that I want to go, or these sorts of things. It's this response that you just instantly feel drawn to someone is how I would really sort of think about it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that when we're sort of earlier in our careers, it is often the people who are identified as high performers or high potential for leadership, like emerging leaders, often it's because they are starting to demonstrate executive presence. And I think when we're further on or when we're more senior in our career, often the way that I would describe it is it's someone that you want to follow.
Mm,
So it's sort of that sort of visionary is able to really clearly inspire people at an emotive level, like, yes, I'm on board, I want to do that thing. And there is an element of, like, I hate this word, but charisma,
mm,
right? It's like,
yeah,
and I also kind of want to be their friend, or maybe I feel a little bit overwhelmed by them or intimidated by them, but in a way that makes me better.
yeah.
Not
It's like, yeah, that intimidation's a funny one because it's sort of like, and it's just, yeah, your own insecurities kicking in because you've just like witnessed someone that's confident in their own skin.
yeah,
And because often they're not arrogant at all. Like, and very
yeah,
much as soon as you see someone that's arrogant, like they lose executive presence because you know it's getting driven
yeah,
by some sort of insecurity and things. No, it's
yeah,
these people that are just so comfortable in their own skin that they're just happy to show up, and then people become drawn to them. And then, yeah, you might have a moment of like, oh, I could never be as good as them, or like, and it's like, no, like they're not doing anything that you couldn't do. They're comfortable in themselves,
yeah,
and that's exuding out.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, exactly. And um, executive presence and vulnerability are not mutually exclusive, right?
mm,
So you can still, I think of a fantastic leader, and when we had gone through a couple of rounds of redundancies, and this person who was in the like CEO role needed to communicate that, there was so much emotion in their voice that it was powerful. It
mm,
wasn't like everyone was like, "Oh, you guys are awful. I can't believe you've made my friend redundant." It was like, "I hate that that person's been made redundant, but I can see that you hate it even more."
mm,
And
mm,
so I still felt aligned with them.
mm,
So I think the thing with executive presence is, and the reason that it's important is because ultimately it's a manifestation of your personal brand. But it's that I'll put an article in the comments, but a caption, whatever. It's a combination of gravitas, communication, and appearance.
mm,
Is how like researchers have distilled it down.
mm,
And gravitas is things like how confident you are, how well you how inclusive you are, how you hold space, your knowledge and your competence in what you're
mm,
doing. And then communication is exactly as it sounds, how well you communicate, but equally how well you hear and take on board
mm,
others. And then appearance is the least impactful element of executive presence, but it is important because, studies have shown that if someone looks particularly healthy and fit and groomed, for example,
yeah,
then others are more likely to want to follow them
yeah,
and align with them.
yeah,
I think, and this is not based on any research that I've done, but when I think of leaders like Steve Jobs, wearing pretty much the same clothes every day, and I know that's driven by to reduce decision fatigue,
mm,
but I think that level of predictability embeds comfort, and that can contribute to that level of executive presence. So they're kind
mm.
of the key areas, I guess, to sort of distill it down. So if someone wants to improve their personal brand or executive presence or just be more aligned with self, I guess, what would you suggest is like the first step or couple of steps? Like, where do they start?
Um, I think it's just about people working out what's the first step that I want to take. Where do I want to start to experiment in some of the different ways of communicating
Hmm.
who I am and where I belong and all of that stuff. So, but explore options and have curiosity with how you go about that, how you explore your inner world, and how you want to put yourself out there. Like just be really curious, really open, really optimistic about what could happen if you decided to be proactive rather than reactive in how you want to communicate who you are.
Yeah. Oh, well, I actually can't wrap it up any better than that. That was an excellent summary. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I should have done it in my best newsreader voice so that I could really close this out. But look, that's your strength, not mine. And I'm just going to lean into my strengths.
Well, and you have. Thank you. Thank you for all of your generous sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone listening. We'll be back. Well, I'll be back in your ears next time.